Most of us have a basic understanding of what ethics means. It does mean that people understand right from wrong and behave within the law. Don't be confused though, just obeying the law doesn't mean that every behavior within the law is ethical. And there are lots of examples. We might consider, is it ethical for a company to lay off employees when they could use other cost-cutting measures instead? Especially if they're in a small community. We think of how small communities are devastated when companies close. Sometimes companies do have to close. We're not going to negate the business necessities that are out there. A couple of other things that your chapter talks about related to ethics. Sarbanes-Oxley comes up. It says this is a law. It's called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It's named after two congressmen who wrote it. It emerged after the Enron, WorldCom, and a couple of other scandals that were related to finances, general accounting kinds of issues. And so we haven't yet discovered, it's been about 10 years in place, we haven't yet discovered the full cost of complying to this law will be. And a lot of businesses do say that it costs them a lot of money to actually comply with this law. If you remember, Enron happened in the late 90s, and around 2000 it came crashing to the ground. It was involved in some major accounting scandals. It was hiding product losses or business losses in shell companies. It was creating offshore accounts and minor companies like holdings and burying losses inside those so that the company of Enron looked like it was making money. And it was out of that particular business disaster, among a few others, when Sarbanes-Oxley was written. There are, in corporate America, in very large companies, you will find that they have entire floors devoted to staff that are engaged in what we call compliance. Not just compliance with SOX, but all other federal regulations and state regulations. And those staff members would be people like lawyers and accountants and forensic accountants and people who work in those specific business areas. On the other side, we also have the notion of social responsibility. So not only do we want businesses to be honest and above board and to engage in ethical practices and being what we might consider moral, but we also want them to be good community members. We want them to be maybe engaged in the community beyond employing people. Now this is something of a new trend. 100 years ago it wasn't such a big deal, but in the past 2 decades I would say the idea that businesses need to be corporate citizens has been in the a raised awareness of that. And a lot of customers pick their companies based on their social responsibility practices. And those can range a number of ways. A company could engage in social responsibility that would tweak the interest of a consumer by offering products that are green, organic, with special packaging. It might be that they like to trade with companies that engage in activities in the community. You might think about a company that sponsors a marathon. In the city of Richmond, Virginia, Ucrops, which is no longer around, but they sponsored the Monument Avenue 10K. And there are lots of corporate businesses that get involved in sort of very visible activities like that. But there are also businesses that do things sort of in the quiet. There are a lot of businesses that give their employees release time so that they can, while being paid, go to an elementary school and mentor or tutor a child. And we might not hear about those kinds of things all the time, but they certainly make an impact in the community. And the people who are specifically involved in those activities would know what companies are doing. So those are some just sort of generic things. So if you think about social responsibility and the things that you want companies to do. Those would be kind of some examples of some things. On the other hand, we also look at companies and may choose not to trade with them, if you will, or shop with them because of their corporate practices. There are people, I know people who won't buy Texaco gas because someone in Texaco was caught on camera saying things that were discriminatory. There are people who will not buy Exxon gas because of the Exxon Valdez disaster, which happened over 10 years ago. Someone might not like to buy Abercrombie and Fitch clothing for their children because their catalog was almost pornographic at one time. And so people might think that that company doesn't share their values, so they may choose to not do that. I used to think that boycotts didn't work. And I'll tell you a funny story, and the reason I didn't think they work was because I wasn't capable of maintaining one. I couldn't boycott a company. I just never felt that strongly about it, or didn't think I had enough discipline to do it. But actually, boycotts really do work. And there was a college boycott that came about when Nike got in trouble for their factories that they had in Vietnam. And some college students got into some activities so that they could help protest the conditions of these factories in Vietnam, and Nike responded. And so boycotts really do work. There's a lot of data out there that shows that when people boycott companies and they are open about it and share their views with the companies often do listen. So I hope they'll give you some ideas about how to think about social responsibility, and give you another way of looking at the Enron and the ethics scandals that we've seen in the past. Sarbanes-Oxley, again, is a very large piece of regulation that companies have to abide by, and it's really important for us to understand what those things cost. If you think about it, because of the bad deeds of some companies, other companies now have to spend a lot of money. So they're kind of punished for someone else's bad behavior. And of course, we all know that that happens in the world pretty often.